The bustle of the 1980s. On an average weekday, thousands of commuters pass through Cambridge Station. Their destination will most probably be the capital, and their means of transport will be in the latest generation of electric units. The railway reflects this age of mass travel, with everything from signalling to station hardware, designed to work at maximum efficiency. This is a totally different era from that of 30 years ago. Then Cambridge Station was the hub of a system of branch lines serving the eastern counties. In the first part of this program, we'll study one of these lines, that of the branch running northeast to the town of Mildenhall. The flat landscape of the eastern counties was an easy one in which to build railways. An extensive network could develop, unhindered by geographical obstacles such as hills and valleys. However, the area was at the same time sparsely populated, with agriculture the main occupation. Cambridge provided the starting point for the branch to Mildenhall. We'll now take a journey along the branch in 1959. Notice the LNER lower quadrant power-operated signals at the northern end of Cambridge Station. These were to survive until the early 1970s. The trains for Mildenhall followed the main line to King's Lynn for a short distance and then diverged to the northeast at the junction station at Barnwell. Once on the branch, the pace of things slowed down considerably. These sequences were filmed with the full cooperation of the engine crew, who would obligingly back the train down the platform and re-enter the station to ensure that the cameraman obtained the perfect sequence of film. The signalman here at Barnwell lived alongside the line at Swaffham Prior, several miles away on the branch. And the driver would often slow down while approaching this spot in order to deposit a few lumps of coal in the garden. On more than one occasion, the coal was thrown a little too enthusiastically and actually landed in the fireplace in the house. The train crew often supplemented their station stops by picking up passengers by the line. Such practices were a little safer when conducted well away from the main line. The first of the stations was here at Quine. The station master greets the train in time-honored fashion. These sequences were taken from the steps of the signal box. The box itself was well out of bounds to all visitors because it housed the station master's collection of prized geraniums. We're now approaching the second of the stations at Bottisham. Notice the small yard on the right of the line. Freight traffic was generally light and was of a seasonal nature, being based on agricultural traffic. By the time these scenes were taken, most perishable traffic had been transferred to road haulage. Cambridge had an allocation of Ivert Class II moguls, and these modern lightweight locomotives occasionally saw action on the branch. Now, notice the way the track slews to the right at Swaffham Prior. This was the intended site of a passing loop. Burwell possessed a fairly large station. At this time, the main station house had a large, leather-bound Bible, which was held with strict instructions that parts should be read out to staff in times of need. Such a practice was, in fact, common in the days of the Great Eastern Railway. At Fordham, the branch crossed the line from Ely to Ipswich. The station was reasonably busy with interchange traffic, and on this occasion there was some freight to collect from the local market gardens. We're now back on the single-tracked branch and heading northwest towards the next of the stations at Isleham. Mildenhall was the largest and busiest station on the line. It was typical of numerous branch termini in the eastern counties, possessing a run-round loop, goods shed, turntable, and signal box. 62785 was the last survivor of the 240 wheel arrangement on British Railways. She was built at Stratford in 1895 by the Great Eastern as one of 100 members of Class T26, and was later classified Class E4 by the LNER. 62785 outlived her classmates by nearly 2 years, working from Cambridge Shed until her withdrawal in December 1959. The locomotive then returned to Stratford under her own steam for restoration as GER number 490. She can now be seen in all the glory of the Great Eastern blue livery at York, although 1959 was to be the last year of actual steaming. This sequence was obligingly laid on by the staff for our cameraman, who was told to crouch down in an overgrown pit at the side of the turntable in order to film from a rather unusual viewpoint. Power was provided by the train crew. Turning the E4 with its short wheelbase was a relatively easy matter, although larger engines could present more of a problem. After turning, 62785 is ready for the return run to Cambridge. Soon after these scenes were taken, a DMU service was introduced. However, this only postponed closure for a couple of years, and on the 18th of June 1962, the passenger service was withdrawn, although freight survived until 1964. By 1968, the track had been lifted, and the memory of services along the branch became ever more distant. Today, in 1988, Mildenhall Station survives, having been beautifully restored as a private dwelling. The station site too has been cleared of vegetation, while the magnificent goods shed still sees regular use. The absence of large earthworks on the line has meant the disappearance of long sections of track bed. The line beyond these bushes has been completely ploughed under. The substantial Great Eastern buildings have proved ideal for restoration, although this example at Isleham is hardly recognizable as a former station. At Fordham, the interchange platforms and junctions have totally disappeared, although the main station building, seen to the left of the line, survives. For a line which closed 25 years ago, some of the stations survive in a remarkable state of preservation. This example at Bottisham retains both platforms, together with original buildings. At Quai, the signal box and its geraniums have long since departed, although once again the station remains reasonably intact. Remarkably, one section of the line remains open to freight traffic. Barnwell Junction still possesses a single track serving a nearby industrial estate. The days of the steam-worked East Anglian branch line of the 50s belong to a very different age of rural travel. By the mid-1960s, the sight of closed and abandoned stations was becoming all too common. Whole networks of rural lines were destined to succumb to the axe. Like East Anglia, the sparsely populated areas of the northern borders were unable to support the lines so generously provided during the railway mania of the late 19th century. Northumberland's system of branch lines, running from the East Coast Main Line, was reduced to just one, running from Alnmouth to Alnwick by 1964. This 3-mile line was to connect the market town of Alnwick with the East Coast Main Line via the junction at Alnmouth. The attractive market town of Alnwick was one of the largest in the region and generated considerable traffic for the railway, which arrived in 1850. The station was rebuilt with a magnificent overall roof by the North Eastern Railway in 1887, when the branch onto Coldstream was opened that same year. However, the Coldstream line was to be short-lived, and it closed in 1930, leaving just the 3-mile connection to Alnmouth. Harsh winter weather is a common feature of the East Coast, and January 1966 was to be no exception, with bitterly cold easterly winds bringing periods of heavy snowfall. There followed a fairly elaborate procedure at the terminus. Trains were backed down the line in order to take water and run round the coaches. The branch locomotive was certainly the maid of all work and would regularly shunt the yard. Although a thoroughly LNER design, the K1 Class 260s didn't appear until BR days. All 70 of the class were built by North British in 1949 and 1950. They were at the time mixed traffic engines and worked over most of the former LNER, being particularly associated with the West Highland line. Interestingly, the line had been equipped with colour lights. With a journey of only 3 miles, journey times were rather short, which is probably just as well with tender first running. It's now the summer of 1966, and conditions have certainly improved. We are now within sight of the main line, seen crossing the viaduct in the distance. Steam was to finish on this attractive branch on the 18th of June 1966, although the passenger service was to continue, operated by 2-car DMUs. Final closure came on the 29th of January 1968. The substantial buildings at the terminus were soon used for other purposes, and 20 years later, the structure survives in a good state of preservation. At the former junction at Alnmouth, the bay platform and sidings were long ago lifted, and the station has since been entirely rebuilt. Today's high-speed trains take the East Coast main line from Newcastle to Edinburgh, unhindered by the junctions which once served Northumberland's extensive system of branches. To the passenger travelling in the 1960s, rail offered a comprehensive network of lines serving virtually every corner of the country. Even rural areas like East Anglia possessed a good network of lines. Scenes like these were common throughout the system. Such lines accounted for a sizable part of the total track mileage, and yet, not surprisingly, accounted for only a small percentage of the traffic carried on the railway as a whole. With railway losses mounting in the early 1960s, drastic action was deemed necessary by the government of the day. Dr. Beeching was given the task of streamlining the network, and the famous Beeching Plan appeared in 1963. The plan proposed nothing less than the reshaping of British railways by axing the unprofitable parts of the network, with the intention of eliminating the railway's deficit by 1970. The growth of road competition led to the belief that this freed the railways from any social obligation to provide all transport services, particularly those in rural areas. Lines like these accounted for only a small percentage of the railway's total revenue. Indeed, it was claimed that 1/3 of the railway's route mileage accounted for a mere 1% of total passenger revenue. In an attempt to reduce the losses incurred by many rural lines, certain economies were introduced. Pay trains, as they were known, carried a conductor guard who collected fares, which avoided the need for station staff. Track rationalization, staff redundancies, and the introduction of lightweight diesel multiple units failed to stem the mounting losses, and the closures continued. This service from March to King's Lynn was withdrawn on the 9th of September 1968. However, other lines doggedly refused to succumb to the axe. The branch from Dereham to Wyndham was one of these. Closure was announced on the 12th of January 1968. But a lack of replacement bus services postponed actual closure until October 1969. These scenes were taken during the summer of 1969. By this time, the line had already been heavily rationalized, with the lifting of the passing loops and removal of much of the signaling. The end of passenger services would finally come on the 6th of October, 1969. Solitude, where there'd once been the comings and goings of passengers. Silence, where there'd once been the sound of trains. Scenes like these were being repeated throughout the country. A total of 2,300 stations were to close, and 5,000 route miles of railway were to be abandoned. There remained only one feverish round of activity. By the 1970s, the days of the rural branch line in East Anglia had virtually disappeared. The extensive network of lines, like those serving towns such as Swaffham and Mildenhall, had been closed. And yet, despite this, the timeless air of the East Anglian country branch was to survive in just one or two corners of the network. It is perhaps only natural that the rural backwaters of the country should have been bypassed by the rationalization and modernization that has affected most other parts of the network. The area to the north and east of Norwich is certainly one of those regions. Despite its relative closeness to the southeast, this area is essentially agricultural, very different to the conurbations to the south and west. Today, northeast Norfolk is served by a long single-track railway running north from the rest of the network at Norwich and terminating at Sheringham. This line was once one of many such branches serving virtually every town and many of the villages in this area. But this system was a luxury for a sparsely populated region. Melton Constable was once a railway town, with more in common with Crewe or Doncaster than with agricultural Norfolk. 27 years ago, this village echoed to the sound of trains connecting with every corner of Norfolk and running as far afield as the Midlands. The works was the centre of the Midland and Great Northern Joint Railway, and the site in the foreground, that of a busy station. With the closure of this and many other lines during the 1950s and 60s, the network was reduced to just one line, running north from Norwich. Norwich's imposing red brick structure is the hub of the railway system of northeast Anglia. Victorian canopies play host to modern electric trains and diesel units. But, hidden away in the depths of the structure, stand some veteran diesels, which provide our link with a very different system. Around 13 times each day, the branch train for Sheringham leaves from this platform. The tiny wooden signal box of Whitlingham Junction marks the point where the Sheringham branch diverges to the north. Rather surprisingly, this line is known for its gradients. Long, gradual ones climbing up one side of a hill and then descending down the other. Such a feature is not uncommon in the eastern counties, where lines were built on the cheap by avoiding costly embankments and cuttings. Sal House hardly sees much in the way of traffic, standing as it does in the middle of a field. The wooden buildings of one platform have been demolished, but those on the other have survived, complete with their original Great Eastern canopies. Further north, the line crosses the Broads at the town of Wroxham. This complex network of shallow lakes, connected by around 200 miles of navigable waterway, are almost entirely man-made, being the flooded remnants of former peat and turf workings. The Sheringham line possesses that traditional feature of the branch line, the signal box, or nerve centre of a system of mechanical signalling. At Wroxham, tokens are exchanged for the single-track sections either side. Wroxham was once the junction for a line running due west to Aylesham. The line has since closed, although the truncated track remains in place. Beyond this point, the line is slowly returning to nature, after final closure to freight traffic in the late 1970s. These Metro Camel DMUs have taken over from the Cravens units and work all the passenger services on the branch. The class has been associated with branch line services since introduction in the 1950s. The richness of the Norfolk soil has greatly influenced the history of the county. The wealth of medieval times manifested itself in the construction of churches, and the skyline is dominated by these reminders of past glories. Worstead's church dominates the village, which, through its cloth manufacture, has given its name to the English language. The booming woolen industry was once centred here, and the streets of 17th century Worstead were described thus by one visitor. Hardly a person is to be found in the street, toiling as they are at their looms in hundreds of dwellings. The church, like so many others on the line, dominates the railway. Worstead Station has a great deal in common with the former lines from King's Lynn to March and from Dereham to Wyndham. Despite a certain amount of rationalisation, the station is reminiscent of the East Anglian branch of 20 or more years ago. The absence of earthworks and the flat terrain have led to another common feature of the East Anglian branch, with many level crossings, most of them operated by manually controlled crossing gates. Most of these are scheduled for replacement by automatic barriers during 1989. North Walsham was once a busy junction, with lines connecting with the Midland and Great Northern Joint Line and the line northeast to Munsley-on-Sea. The closure of these took place 30 years ago, and yet, despite this, the station remains in a time warp and has hardly changed. From North Walsham, the line heads due north towards the coast. The seaside resort at Cromer was once served by a complex of lines and junctions terminating at Cromer Beach and Cromer High stations. In 1954, Cromer High was closed, and traffic made a detour via Ruton Road Junction to Cromer Beach. Today, the town is littered with reminders from a more prosperous railway age. This DMU is approaching the station at Cromer Beach. Here, both the Sheringham and Cromer lines run side by side into the terminus. The station is provided with a signal box, connecting lines, and a main and bay platform. The overall roof has now been converted for other uses, and today's trains stop short of the station. From Cromer to Sheringham, the line takes a course along the coast, maintaining a distance of half a mile from the cliffs. And this is probably just as well, because the pounding of the North Sea is eroding the coastline at a steady rate. This is the sole surviving section of the former Midland and Great Northern Railway to remain open to BR passenger traffic. Perhaps surprisingly for Norfolk, the coast near Sheringham is bordered by a series of hills, the glacial remains of past ice ages. After the beautifully preserved stations like North Walsham, it comes as some disappointment that the terminus at Sheringham consists of a solitary wooden platform. The original station was closed back in 1967, and today serves as the headquarters for a private steam railway. The Sheringham line has, in many ways, changed considerably since the days of the steam-worked branch of the 1950s. In other respects, it remains remarkably unchanged, and 30 years later, continues to preserve the tradition of the country branch line.
The cover photograph has been supplied by Colour Rail. For full details of their range of slides, send £2.25 to 5 Treacher's Close, Chesham, Bucks.
Transport Video Publishing produce and distribute a wide range of video programs. This section gives details of our range of tapes. Steam View is the quarterly video magazine for the steam enthusiast. Each program contains a number of features, each looking at a particular aspect of the railway scene. Steam View Volume 11 was released in September 1988 and features locomotive profile, the A4s with coverage of Mallard on the main line, Steam around Salisbury with detailed coverage of 34092's remarkable pacing run during the late summer. Steam View Volume 9 was released in the spring of 1988 and includes a wealth of 16mm colour archive film taken in the Northwest during the last year of steam. Steam View Volume 12 is now available, and subjects include drama on the Settle and Carlisle, Great Western Branch Line Freight, the K1 in Scotland, plus news and events. Prices are inclusive of VAT and include post and packing for the UK. Video Track is a magazine program, the first issue of which was produced in April 1987 in response to the need for a video magazine catering for the enthusiast interested in the railway scene from 1968 to the present day. Video Track issue 8 is now available and includes a final look at the Class 37s on the West Highland lines, locomotive profile, the diesel hydraulics, the railways of Mid-Wales, plus news and events. Issues are published quarterly and are 50 minutes in length. The price of each is £9.95, inclusive of post and packing. Video Track Annual is a special edition of Video Track looking at various aspects of the network over a 12-month period. Program length is 50 minutes. Southern Steam Volume 1 concentrates on steam on the main line with particular emphasis on the Bullhead Pacifics. The program is 55 minutes long and includes approximately 30 minutes of archive film from the 1960s. Rails Across the Fells is a detailed study of the Settle and Carlisle Railway and includes archive film from the 1960s. Running time is 50 minutes. The The Country Railway provides a study of 3 secondary lines around the country. North Wales, Lincolnshire and the Hayling Island branch are covered using archive film from the 1960s. Running time is 45 minutes. The Magic of Steam and The Experience of Steam were released back in 1983 and are still available. They provide an account of steam railways around the world in the late 1970s, early 1980s. Video Profile is a new series of programs, each looking at one aspect of the railway scene. Volumes 1, 2 and 3 are presently available. Video Profile Volume 3 is the latest in these releases and provides a study of 4 first-generation diesel classes comprising the Class 31s, Class 50s, Class 37s and Class 47s. Branch Line Byways is now available, price £16.95. Please note this was previously advertised as the Branch Line Railway. Running time is 50 minutes. Full details of these and other programs are given in our brochure. Programs are available from all good railway centres or by mail order from Transport Video Publishing, P.O. Box 229, Wheathampstead, Herts, AL4 8SD.